Father, we thank you that we can gather here once again.
Ich bitte dich, dass du, Herr, die Andacht jetzt segnest.
I pray that you would now bless this meeting, this worship.
Hilf uns, dass wir uns auf dein Wort konzentrieren
Please help us to concentrate on your word
und dass wir es zu Herzen nehmen
and that we would take it to heart
und es im Alltag auch ausleben.
and that we would be able to put it into practice in our everyday.
Sei jetzt mit deinem Heiligen Geist gegenwärtig, Herr, und dass unsere Gedanken nicht abgelenkt werden.
And please be present with your Holy Spirit and help us that we would not be distracted.
Und verdanken wir dir, Herr, in Jesu Namen.
And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay. Good. So, good evening once more.
So, guten Abend ein weiteres Mal.
And this evening we want to look at the topic of gossip and slander.
Und heute Abend wollen wir dieses Thema von Tratsch und schlechtes Reden anschauen.
And because it's also part of present truth.
Weil es auch ein Teil ist von der gegenwärtigen Wahrheit.
Because when we look at our fractal here, since 2020, we're now just before this vaccination mandate here.
Denn wenn wir unsere Fraktal hier anschauen, seit 2020, wir stehen kurz vor diesem Impfzwang hier.
One second, they're writing the stream would be off.
Okay, so we're just before this point here.
So, wir sind gerade vor diesem Punkt hier.
And we understand that this test then is a type for the sixth plague. Okay.
Wir verstehen, dass dieser Test hier ist eine Typus für die 6. Plage.
Okay, so and let's just remind us quickly, let's go to Revelation chapter 12.
Nur zur Erinnerung gehen wir zur Offenbarung Kapitel 12.
Because during this sixth plague, what are we to do?
Denn während dieser 6. Plage, was sollen wir tun?
Cry day and night for deliverance, right?
Heulen und klagen Tag und Nacht für Befreiung.
Because Satan, he is accusing us day and night, right?
Weil
In this
Satan, er klagt uns an, er wirft uns vor Tag und Nacht.
Klagt uns also. Yes. So let's read in Revelation 12 the verses 9 to 10.
Wir lesen in Offenbarung 12 die Verse 9 und 10.
It says, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." Okay, so this is therefore, he's cast out when Christ says it is done, it is finished. Right?
Er wird hinausgeworfen, wenn Christus sagt, es ist getan, es ist vollbracht.
But before that, it says he accused God's people day and night.
Aber davor es sagt, dass er Gottes Volk Tag und Nacht anklagt.
And we also saw the story of Job.
Und wir
Right.
haben auch die Geschichte von Hiob gesehen.
In Job's story, who came first?
Und in die Geschichte von Hiob, wer kam zuerst?
His three friends,
Seine
right?
3 Freunde.
He accused him, but at the end, then also Elihu came.
Sie klagten ihm an, aber dann am Ende kam Elihu auf.
And therefore, we can see Satan is not literally, I mean, he will also put evil thoughts in your mind, for sure, but he will use agents, right?
Ich meine, Satan wird sicherlich böse Gedanken in deinen Verstand einlegen, aber grundsätzlich wird er böse Agenten, seine Agenten benutzen.
Okay, and we understand it's those that are, quote unquote, your friends, okay?
Und wir verstehen, das sind diejenigen, die deine sogenannten Freunde sind.
Okay, so those that left the truth and that basically opened their hearts to Satan, he will use them.
Also diejenigen, die die Wahrheit verlassen haben und ihrem Herzen den Satan auftaten, gerade die wird er benutzen.
And therefore it's important to understand what we need to guard against, that we not become partakers of these slanderers.
Und deswegen ist es wichtig, dass wir verstehen, von was wir uns behüten sollen, dass wir nicht Teilnehmer from these what? Sorry?
Slanderers.
Also von diese böse Redern.
Slander is like
Tratsch.
Speaks lies and
yes.
Nee.
There's no German word for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Verleumdung.
Verleumder.
Yes.
Ja, diese Verleumder.
Yes,
Danke.
that's good. Yes. Okay, so let's go to Matthew chapter 5 in our notes,
So,
verses
in die Notizen, Matthäus 5,
11 to 12.
die Verse 11 und 12.
Jesus says, Blessed are ye, when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. So when do you receive the reward?
So, wann erhältst du die Belohnung?
in heaven.
Yes, at the seventh plague, right? This is when he brings
Bei
the
der 7. Plage.
But before that, you get persecuted and you get reviled and falsely accused.
Aber davor wirst du verfolgt und falsch angeklagt und verpönt.
But you should rejoice in these things.
Aber wir sollten frohlocken in diese Sache.
Okay, and in Matthew 10, 24 to 25, it says,
Matthäus 10, die Verse 24, 25, es sagt folgendes.
The disciple is not above his master, nor the servant above his Lord. It is enough for the disciple that he be as his master and the servant as his Lord. If they have called the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? Okay, so if they called Christ Beelzebub, how much more will they call us if we follow Christ also of the devil, right?
Also wenn sie Christus Beelzebub, also vom Teufel genannt haben, wie viel mehr werden sie wenn wir Gott treu folgen, auch dasselbe nennen.
And we can already see that more and more people rise up that were part of this movement, saying we are basically led by Satan and we're the deceivers and all these things. Right?
Und wir können jetzt schon bereits sehen, viel mehr oder mehr und mehr diese Menschen, die einst mal Teil dieser Bewegung waren, die sich auflehnen und klagen uns an und sagen, dass wir vom Teufel geführt sind und so weiter.
Okay, in Psalms 35, verses 11 to 12.
Psalm 35, die Verse 11 und 12.
False witnesses that rise up. They laid to my charge things that I knew not. They rewarded me evil for good to the spoiling of my soul. So what can we also expect?
So was können wir auch denn erwarten? I'm going to bring lies against us.
Yes, they will bring lies against us and they will reward us evil for good. Okay?
Also die werden Lügen gegen uns anbringen und sie werden das Güte belohnen mit Bösen.
Yeah, so you might have done those people many good things in the past and you always wish the best for them, but they will disregard this and they will just treat you like the worst thing. Okay?
Und du magst vielleicht in der Vergangenheit viele gute Sachen für diese Menschen getan und immer nur deren Besten wohl gewünscht, aber die werden das übersehen. And what was the last thing you
And they
said?
will treat you like the worst thing. Okay?
Und die werden dich behandeln wie das Schlimmste.
And this is what the experience of the psalmist is, right?
Und das ist die Erfahrung von der Psalmschreiber.
Okay. Okay. So now let's go to the first quote.
Gehen wir jetzt zu dem ersten Zitat.
And this is about Christ's experience.
Das spricht über die Erfahrung von Christus.
It says this prophecy of enmity between Satan and Christ is far-reaching. It is a delineation of an unwearied conflict between Christ and his followers, and Satan and his angels, and fallen men united in a desperate companionship to reproach, bruise, wound, and exterminate the followers of Christ to the close of time. This controversy between Satan and Christ was carried on here in this world. Satan was constantly afflicting the Son of God and creating prejudice in the minds of men. Not only were Christ's doctrines and teachings perverted, misinterpreted, and wrested from the true meaning, but falsehoods followed him everywhere. His pure character was assailed, and he was compelled to flee from one city to another because of the spies upon his track. The falsehoods and misrepresentations that the chief priests and Pharisees and Sadducees poured into the ears of the people appealed to the worst passions of adulterers, fornicators, and dishonest men, exciting a burning prejudice that made it almost impossible for him to live upon the earth for even 3 years and a half after his public ministry began. Okay, so that's why he was traveling always constantly around, because the people, they were stirred up by these false accusers. Okay?
Deswegen reiste Jesus immer umher, weil überall, wo er hinkam, die Menschen haben diese falsche Anklagen gegen ihn erhoben.
Okay. Why then should those who bear the truth of God to the world be discouraged and faint-hearted? Christ has said, if the world hate you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you are not of the world, ye are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. They will revile you and persecute you and say all manner of evil against you falsely for my name's sake. Yea, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service. And these things will they do unto you, because they have not known the Father nor me. Okay, so they will have such a prejudice against you. They think it's a righteous act to do evil to you. Okay?
Die werden solche Vorurteile gegen dich haben, dass sie denken, es ist eine gerechte Tat, dir Böses anzutun.
It's nice that she took Matthew 5, speaking evil, and then led you down to John 16, where it put you to death. She's linked the two.
Yes.
Also sie hat hier Matthäus 5, wo sie Böses gegen dich sprechen, mit Johannes 16, wo die dich zum Tode verurteilen, miteinander verbunden. Also eins führt denn zum anderen.
Yes, so we can expect that it will just constantly increase to the culmination here at the end.
So, wir können nur erwarten, dass es beständig fortwährend zunehmen werden bis zur Gipfel hier am Ende.
And you also must expect that you cannot expect mercy and all these things, okay?
Und wir müssen eben erwarten, dass wir bloß keine Gnade erwarten können von diesem Menschen.
Yeah. You can say, why we have known you, we have known each other for so long, and why you do these things, but you cannot expect to reason with these people. Okay?
Also es gibt kein Rechen mit diesen Menschen. Du kannst nicht zu denen sagen, wir kennen uns so lange, warum tust du diese Sachen? Also der wird keinen Rahmen geben.
You must understand, it's not a war against flesh and blood, it's a war against Satan.
Wir müssen wohl verstehen, das ist kein Kampf gegen Fleisch und Blut, sondern eben gegen Satan.
And therefore we need to, we must not be surprised against or over certain developments. Okay.
Also wir sollten denn nicht überrascht werden über solch Entwicklung.
Especially when the Lord clearly says that these things will come. Okay.
Insbesondere wenn der Herr sagt ganz klar, dass diese Sachen wohl kommen werden.
Okay, let's read the next paragraph.
So, nächsten Absatz.
Satan's malignity reached its height when the Lord of glory was crucified. And we may expect in our day that man's hearts will be open to prejudice and to the falsehoods and wicked misrepresentations and slander of those who love this kind of satanic work. Okay, so that's the problem. Okay, we are easily affected and infected by these slanders. Okay?
Das ist das Problem. Wir sind sehr zu leicht infiziert und affektiert.
Also beeinflusst, oder?
Beeinflusst von diesen
von Verleumdungen.
Verleumdungen, danke.
Yes.
I read a quote today where it says that they were injected with this venom or this venom curse or something like that. It was using the inoculation, but to say instead of you receiving the vaccination, you're receiving this venomous, this spirit of Satan into you.
Yes.
So, ich habe ein Zitat heute gelesen, wo es so aufgebaut worden ist, dass es sagt, dass diese Gift von Satan dir eingespritzt würde. So.
Yes. Okay, so therefore, and I see it, that it's sometimes not easy to resist these gossips and these things that people suddenly say about others. Okay.
Ich sehe das selber, es ist manchmal nicht leicht, diese Verleumdungen zu widerstehen, die Menschen gegen dich bringen.
Yes. Okay. No, you listen to when somebody else is accusing somebody else, you know.
Also wenn jemand anders anklägt, zum Beispiel.
It's always a seed. Yeah,
Es ist
goes
immer eine
into your
Saat.
heart. Okay. So, next quote.
Nächster Zitat.
It says, and this speaks now about about the two crowns, okay, the heavenly crown and the earthly crown.
Das spricht hier über diese zwei Kronen, also der himmlische und das irdische.
I then saw a company pressing through the crowd with their eyes intently fixed upon the heavenly crown. As they earnestly urged their way through the disorderly crowd, angels attended them and made room for them to advance. As they neared the heavenly crown, the light emanating from it shone upon them and around them, dispelling their darkness and growing clearer and brighter until they seemed to be transformed and resembled the angels. They cast not one lingering look upon the earthly crown. Those who were in pursuit of the earthly mocked them and threw black balls after them. These did them no injury, while their eyes were fixed upon the heavenly crown. But those who turned their attention to the black balls were stained with them. The following scripture was presented before me. Okay, so yes, you need constantly to look up. Okay.
Du musst beständig hinaufschauen.
Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
The black balls which were thrown after the saints were the reproachful falsehoods put in circulation concerning God's people by those who love and make a lie. We should take the greatest care to live a blameless life and abstain from all appearance of evil, and then it is our duty to move boldly forward and pay no regard to the reproachful falsehoods of the wicked. While the eyes of the righteous are fixed upon the heavenly priceless treasure, they will become more and more like Christ, and thus they will be transformed and fitted for translation. Okay, so that's our only chance. Yeah? Don't listen to these accusations.
Das ist unsere einzige Hoffnung. Hört diese Anklagen nicht an.
Okay. And we also, it says here, we should make sure, in preparation for this time, to abstain from all appearance of evil as much as possible.
Und es sagt auch in Vorbereitung auf diese Zeit, dass wir versuchen jetzt schon von dieser Ansehen des Bösen so weit wie möglich fernzuhalten oder
Von dem
zu vermeiden.
Von dem Schein des Bösen. Bösen Anschein.
Also von der Schein des Bösen zu vermeiden.
Yes. Okay, next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
Satan has many helpers. Many who profess to be Christians are aiding the tempter to catch away the seeds of truth from other hearts. Many who listen to the preaching of the Word of God make it the subject of criticism at home. They sit in judgment on the sermon as they would on the words of a lecturer or a political speaker. The message that should be regarded as the word of the Lord to them is dwelt upon with trifling or sarcastic comment. The minister's character, motives and actions, and the conduct of fellow members of the church are freely discussed. Severe judgment is pronounced, gossip or slander repeated, and this in the hearing of the unconverted. Often these things are spoken by parents in the hearing of their own children. Thus are destroyed respect for God's messengers and reverence for their message. And many are taught to regard lightly God's word itself. Thus in the homes of professed Christians, many youth are educated to be infidels, and the parents question why their children are so little interested in the gospel and so ready to doubt the truth of the Bible. They wonder that it is so difficult to reach them with moral and religious influences. They do not see that their own example has hardened the hearts of their children. The good seed finds no place to take root, and Satan catches it away. Okay, so also this kind of gossip and slander is very dangerous. Okay.
Diese Art von Tratsch und falsches Reden ist sehr gefährlich.
And she goes on to say in the next quote.
Es sagt in dem nächsten Zitat.
So we can even infect our own children with the same spirit. Okay.
So wir können sogar unsere eigenen Kinder mit demselben Geist anstecken.
It says the spirit of gossip and tale-bearing is one of Satan's special agencies to sow discord and strife, to separate friends, and to undermine the faith of many in the truthfulness of our positions. Brethren and sisters are too ready to talk of the faults and errors that they think exist in others, and especially in those who have borne unflinchingly the messages of reproof and warning given them of God. The children of these complainers listen with open ears and receive the poison of disaffection. Parents are thus blindly closing the avenues through which the hearts of the children might be reached. How many families season their daily meals with doubt and questionings? They dissect the characters of their friends and serve them up as a dainty dessert. A precious bit of slander is passed around the board to be commented upon, not only by adults but by children. In this God is dishonored. Jesus said, "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." Therefore Christ is slighted and abused by those who slander his servants. The names of God's chosen servants have been handled with disrespect, and in some cases with absolute contempt, by certain persons whose duty it is to uphold them. The children have not failed to hear the disrespectful remarks of their parents in reference to the solemn reproofs and warnings of God's servants. They have understood the scornful jests and depreciatory speeches that from time to time have met their ears, and the tendency has been to bring sacred and eternal interest in their minds on a level with the common affairs of the world. What a work are these parents doing in making infidels of their children, even in their childhood. This is the way that children are taught to be irreverent and to rebel against heaven's reproof of sin. Okay, so this applies to children, but this applies also as a general principle that we should not dissect and comment and slander and all these things about what we see or might see as false. Okay.
Also das hier ist Kinder angewandt, aber das ist ein Prinzip, der uns allen anzuwenden ist und dass wir all das nicht tun sollen.
No, we're not to comment and slander and dissect and all these things, what we think is false.
Also wir sollten nicht alles auseinanderziehen und darüber sprechen, was wir denken falsch ist.
Okay. Better is to pray and then go to the person directly and speak to the person we think is in error. Okay.
Es ist besser zu beten und geht direkt zu der Person und mit denen alleine sprechen, von dem du meinst, dass sie in Irrtum sind.
Okay. Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
Next quote rather.
Oder nächstes Zitat.
It says, "Our enemies may triumph. They may speak bitter words, and their tongue frame slander, deceit, and falsehood. Yet will we not be moved. We know in whom we have believed. We have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. A reckoning day is coming when all will be judged according to the deeds done in the body. It is true, the world is dark. Opposition may wax strong. The trifler and the scorner may grow bold in their iniquity. Yet for all this we will not be moved, but lean upon the arm of the Mighty One for strength." Next quote.
Nächster Zitat.
"The wrath of man shall praise thee, says the psalmist. The remainder of wrath shalt thou restrain." God means that testing truth shall be brought to the front and become a subject of examination and discussion, even if it is through the contempt placed upon it. The minds of the people must be agitated. Every controversy, every reproach, every slander will be God's means of provoking inquiry and awakening minds that otherwise would slumber. Okay, so the Lord, He can even turn this evil slandering and all these things into something positive in the sense that people start to inquire. Okay.
Der Herr kann dieses böses Reden in irgendetwas Positives verwandeln, dass die Menschen fängen an, also nachzufragen.
But it never justifies us slandering each other. Okay.
Aber das rechtfertigt niemals, dass wir gegeneinander schlecht reden.
Okay, next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
Thus it has been in the past history of God's people. For refusing to worship the great golden image with which Nebuchadnezzar had set up, the 3 Hebrews were cast into the fiery furnace. But God preserved his servants in the midst of the flames, and the attempt to enforce idolatry resulted in bringing the knowledge of the true God before the assembled princes and great men of the vast kingdom of Babylon. And then she goes on to say also about Daniel in the lion's den and also when Paul was imprisoned.
Sie spricht dann weiter in den nächsten Absätzen von Daniel in der Löwengrube und Paulus, als er ins Gefängnis gebracht
And
wird.
so let's just read maybe Paul's case also.
So, lass uns den Fall von Paulus
So
lesen.
just jump over the next paragraph and then to the last paragraph of
Also
the,
der
of the quote.
letzte Absatz von dem Zitat
It
hier.
says, so the imprisonment of Paul brought the gospel before kings, princes and rulers who otherwise would not have had this light. Okay, so we can see that this is basically our experience then in here. Okay, so
Wir können sehen, dass das unsere Erfahrung wird hier drin.
so the Lord permits all these false accusations to be brought against us, that the rulers will be stirred up against us, but this will eventually open a door that we can present the truth from Him.
So,
Okay.
der Herr erlaubt, dass all diese falschen Anklagen gegen uns kommen werden, sodass die Regierende gegen uns aufgebracht werden. Aber das letztendlich wird eine Tür auftun, dass wir die Wahrheit, die denn möglicherweise bringen können.
Therefore, when these things come, don't get anxious about it. Okay,
Also, wenn diese Sachen kommen, also sei nicht furchtsam darüber.
but just trust that the Lord has a plan with it. Just
Aber
bear it and deal with it in the right way.
vertraue nur, dass der Herr einen Plan damit hat. Und wir sollen es erdulden und damit auf die rechte Weise umgehen.
And we will see what is the right way to deal with it.
Und wir werden sehen, was die rechte Weise damit umzugehen ist.
Okay, next quote.
Nächster Zitat.
It says, "We cannot come down." That's taken from Nehemiah.
Das ist von Nehemia genommen.
Time and strength can be better employed than to dwell at length upon the quibbles of our opponents, who deal in slander and misrepresentations. While precious time is employed in following the crooks and turns of dishonest opponents, the people who are open to conviction are dying for want of knowledge. A train of senseless quibbles of Satan's own invention are brought before minds, while the people are crying for food, for meat in due season. It takes those who have trained their minds to war against the truth to manufacture quibbles. And we are not wise to take them from their hands and pass them out to thousands who would never have thought of them had we not published them to the world. This is what our opponents want to have done. They want to be brought to notice and to have us publish for them. This is especially true of some. This is their main object in writing out their falsehoods and in misrepresenting the truth and the characters of those who love and advocate the truth. They will die out more speedily to be left unnoticed, to have their errors and falsehood treated with silent contempt. They do not want to be let alone. Opposition is the element that they love. If it were not for this, they would have but little influence. Okay, so that's why we also should not entertain discussions with spiritualists. Okay.
Deswegen sollten wir nicht Unterhaltungen mit Spiritisten halten.
Yeah, so many times if you just keep silent, don't respond to these things, they will just die out by themselves.
So,
Okay.
öfters mal, wenn du gar nicht darauf eingehst, diese Sachen, und sie einfach mal stumm bleibst, dann werden sie von selbst ersticken.
Satan just wants to steal time from you, and he wants to divert your attention from the right cause to the wrong thing. Okay.
Satan möchte nur deine Zeit stehlen, also deine Aufmerksamkeit von das Richtige zum Falsche zu lenken.
And that's why also Nehemiah said, "I will not come down" when they invited him. Okay.
Deswegen hat Nehemia gesagt, dass ich komme nicht herab, wenn er dazu eingeladen wird.
Okay. Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
There are occasions where the glaring misrepresentations will have to be met. So sometimes it's necessary to meet these things.
So,
Okay.
manchmal ist es wohl notwendig, dass wir diese Sachen begegnen.
When this is the case, it should be done promptly and briefly, and we should then pass on to our work. The plan of Christ's teaching should be ours. He was plain and simple, striking directly at the root of the matter, and the minds of all were met. Okay, so if it needs to be met, then just promptly and briefly and just go to the root of the matter. Okay.
So, wenn es schon mal begegnet werden muss, dann so direkt und zum Wurzel der Sache gehen und nicht lang aushalten.
Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
It is not the best policy to be so very explicit and say all upon a point that can be said when a few arguments will cover the ground and be sufficient for all practical purposes to convince or silence opponents. Okay, so don't always give your whole arguments, okay, if it's enough just to give a few arguments.
So, gib nicht deine ganzen Argumente her, wenn es genüge, ein oder zwei zu geben.
You may remove every prop today and close the mouths of objectors so that they can say nothing, and tomorrow they will go over the same ground again. Thus it will be over and over, because they do not love the light and will not come to the light, lest their darkness and error should be removed from them. It's like a
Record.
never-ending record. It just goes around and around. Okay.
Das ist wie eine Schallplatte mit einem Sprung drin.
Okay. It is a better plan to keep a reserve of arguments than to pour out a depth of knowledge upon a subject which would be taken for granted without labored argument. Christ's ministry lasted only 3 years, and a great work was done in that short period. In these last days, there is a great work to be done in a short time. While many are getting ready to do something, souls will perish for the light and knowledge. If men who are engaged in presenting and defending the truth of the Bible undertake to investigate and show the fallacy and inconsistency of men who dishonestly turn the truth of God into a lie, Satan will stir up opponents enough to keep their pens constantly employed, while other branches of the work will be left to suffer. So if you would respond to all these foolish arguments, you don't have enough time at hand to do this.
Also wenn du all diese törichte Argumenten begegnen würdest, dann hättest du keine Zeit für die Wahrheit.
We must have more of the spirit of those men who were engaged in building the walls of Jerusalem. We are doing a great work and we cannot come down. If Satan sees that he can keep men answering the objections of opponents and thus keep their voices silent and hinder them from doing the most important work for the present time, his object is accomplished. Okay, so this is what he's constantly trying to do.
Das ist, was Satan versucht ständig zu tun.
Next quote.
Nächster Zitat.
The conflict is to wax fiercer and fiercer. Satan will take the field and personate Christ. He will misrepresent, misapply, and pervert everything he possibly can to deceive, if possible, the very elect. Even in our day, there have been and will continue to be entire families who have once rejoiced in the truth, but who will lose faith because of calumnies and falsehoods brought to them in regard to those whom they have loved and with whom they have had sweet counsel. They opened their hearts to the sowing of tares. The tares sprang up among the wheat, they strengthened, and the crop of wheat became less and less, and the precious truth lost its power to them. For a time a false zeal accompanied their new theories, which hardened their hearts against the advocates of truth, as did the Jews against Christ. Okay, so this is also what we can expect. Okay.
So das ist auch, was wir erwarten können.
So when all these accusations and slanders will start, there will be some who will open their hearts to these things.
So, wenn all diese Anklagen und Tratschreden anfängt, einige werden ihrem Herzen dafür auftun.
And she says there will be even whole families who once loved the truth and loved the brethren that will turn away from the truth.
Sie sagt, dass es sogar ganze Familien, die einst die Geschwister und die Wahrheit geliebt haben, die davon abwenden werden.
And we saw this already sometimes he manifested, right?
Und wir haben das bereits hier einige Male manifestiert gesehen.
That certain families, they left the message, they left the movement because of gossip and slander. Okay.
Einige Familien haben die Bewegung, die Wahrheit verlassen, wegen Tratschreden und
Verleumdung.
Verleumdung.
Nice. Okay. Okay, just jump over the next paragraph.
Also überspringen wir diesen nächsten Absatz.
Oh, actually, no, let's read it.
Oder sogar, wir lesen das doch.
Okay. It says, under the zeal of Satan, some have for a time the appearance of man in a flourishing condition. But it is only for a season. Satan carried them so far that they do despite to the Spirit of God. So they prosper for a time, right?
So, sie gedeihen für eine Zeit lang.
They spared themselves like a green bay tree. The Lord suffers them for a time. He allows them to manifest their envy and hatred against the people of God, as he has allowed Satan to develop his character, that he might stand before the heavenly universe, before the worlds unfallen, and the fallen world in his true attributes, as a deceiver, an accuser of the brethren, a murderer at heart. Okay, so the Lord, he allows all this time here up to the very end.
So der Herr erlaubt diese ganze Zeit hier ganz bis zum Ende,
That everybody will manifest his or her character until this time when it's fully then revealed. Okay.
dass jeder seinen Charakter manifestieren werde, gänzlich, bis es vollständig manifestiert ist hier.
Okay. And the wicked, that do this wicked work here, they will flourish and prosper for a while. Okay.
Und
For
die
this time.
Bösen, die diesen Werk in diese Zeit hier tun, sie werden gedeihen und blühen für eine Zeit.
Okay, so we need to expect that when you are faithful to the Lord, this will be a time when you're not strong. Okay, you're the weak one.
Also wir müssen erwarten, dass wenn wir den Herrn treu sind, in dieser Zeit sind wir nicht stark, wir sind den Schwachen.
Okay, and the opponents, they seem to triumph and they seem to gain the victory over you.
Und die
Okay,
Gegner, die scheinen zu triumphieren und den Sieg über dich zu erringen.
but it's all ordained by God to manifest who's who and to basically bring you to the realization that only God can save you. Okay.
Aber es ist alles von Gott bestimmt, sodass jeder sich manifestiert und dich zu der Wahrnehmung zu bringen, dass nur Gott dich retten kann.
Okay, so now let's go to Job 20, verses 5 to 7.
Lass uns zu Hiob Kapitel 20, die Verse 5 bis 7 gehen.
It says that the triumphing of the wicked is short, and the joy of the hypocrite but for a moment. The wicked will just triumph for a short time.
So die
Okay.
Bösen werden nur eine kurze Weile triumphieren.
Though his excellency mount up to the heavens, and his head reach unto the clouds, yet he shall perish forever like his own dung. They which have seen him shall say, where is he? Okay, so the perishing is obviously here at the end. Okay.
So das Vergehen, das ist hier am Ende.
Yeah, but before that, they flourish and they mount up even to heavens.
Aber
Okay.
davor sie blühen und sogar bis auf den Himmel.
And why?
Warum?
What do we understand?
Was verstehen wir?
What does God give you here at the end?
Was gibt der Herr dir hier am Ende?
Yes, okay, but He gives you power,
Er
right?
gibt dir Kraft.
And it's a revival.
Und es ist eine Erweckung.
But before the true comes, Satan will introduce a counterfeit.
Und
Yeah.
noch bevor das Wahre kommt, Satan wird ein Fälschung.
So Satan will begin to give his servants power here.
So
Okay.
Satan wird anfangen, seinen Dienern hier Kraft zu geben.
Okay. And they just increase in power until the very end. Okay.
Und sie nehmen an Kraft zu bis zur Ende.
Okay. So we don't. That's the problem. Yeah, we can hear these things, but I can assure you that when these things come, we will be surprised. Okay.
Also, und daran liegt das Problem. Also wir können von diesen Sachen oft hören, aber wenn sie tatsächlich stattfinden, dann werden wir wohl aufsitzen. Überrascht.
Next quote.
Nächster Zitat.
And here, Sister White now tells us how we should treat these opponents. Okay.
Und hier sagt uns Ellen White, wie wir diese Gegner behandeln sollen.
Christ says, "Love your enemies." Right.
Christus sagt, liebet euer Feinde.
Pray for those that persecute you.
Bete für diejenigen, die euch verfolgen.
Okay. And Sister White also says here,
Ellen White sagt hier auch noch,
treat opponents with respect. Okay. We must expect to meet unbelief and opposition. The truth has always had a content with these elements. Always had to contend with these elements. But though you should meet the bitterest opposition, do not denounce your opponents. They may think, as did Paul, that they are doing God's service. To such we must manifest patience, meekness, and long suffering. Okay, so we're not to denounce them, even though they denounce us. Okay.
also wir sollen, denounce,
Denunzieren, ja. Also
denunzieren, richtig? Okay. Wir sollen sie nicht denunzieren, selbst wenn sie uns denunzieren.
sozusagen schlecht machen, schlecht reden oder sozusagen kritisch zurechtweisen.
Ja, wir sollen sie nicht kritisch zurechtweisen.
Okay. The Lord wants His people to follow other methods than that of condemning wrong, even though the condemnation is just. He wants us to do something more than to hurl at our adversaries charges that only drive them farther from the truth. The work which Christ came to do in our world was not to erect barriers and constantly thrust upon the people the fact that they were wrong. He who expects to enlighten a deceived people must come near to them and labor for them in love. He must become a center of holy influence. Okay, so here we can see that Christ, he came to save and not to destroy.
So hier können wir sehen, dass Christus kam, zu retten und nicht zu zerstören.
Even those enemies that will hate you and do all these evil things against you.
Selbst obwohl diese Feinde, die dich hassen werden und all diese böse Sachen dir antun würden.
We should always try to seek to save them and not to destroy them. Okay?
Wir sollten immer versuchen, sie zu retten und nicht zu zerstören.
And therefore we can see how dependent we are on Christ, because it's not in our nature. Okay.
Deswegen können wir sehen, wie abhängig wir sind von Christus, denn das ist gerade nicht Teil unseres Naturs.
Okay. Next paragraph.
Nächster Absatz.
In the advocacy of truth, the bitterest opponents should be treated with respect and deference. Some will not respond to our efforts, but will make light of the gospel invitation. Others, even those whom we suppose to have passed the boundary of God's mercy, will be won to Christ. The very last work in the controversy may be the enlightenment of those who have not rejected the light and evidence, but who have been in midnight darkness and have in ignorance worked against the truth. Therefore treat every man as honest, speak no word, no deed, that will confirm any in unbelief. Okay, so, I mean, there are obviously then some people that reject the truth, but you never really know who really fully rejected it. Okay.
Es gibt natürlich Menschen, die die Wahrheit abgelehnt haben, aber du weißt nie, wer es vollständig abgelehnt hat.
Okay, and 1 Peter, up to the point when the Lord fully made manifest, right?
Bis zu dem Punkt, wo der Herr vollständig manifest macht.
Okay, because those that reject his exceeding bright light, then you know, okay, they now really rejected God. Okay.
Diejenigen, die äußerst helles Licht verwerfen, also da kannst du wissen, ja, die haben wahrlich Gott abgelehnt.
Okay. Now first Peter chapter 2, 21 to 23.
Jetzt 1. Petrus 2, die Verse 21 bis 23.
For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example, that ye should follow his steps, who did no sin, neither was guile found in his mouth, who, when he was reviled not again, when he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. Okay, so this is what we should follow, this example. Okay.
Dieses Beispiel ist das, was wir befolgen müssen.
So Psalms 35,
Psalm 35,
verse 11 to 14.
Verse 11 bis 14.
False witnesses did rise up. They laid to my charge things that I knew not. They rewarded me evil for good, to the spoiling of my soul. But as for me, when they were sick, my clothing was sackcloth. I humbled my soul with fasting, and my prayer returned into mine own bosom. I behaved myself as though he had been my friend or brother. I bowed down heavily as one that mourneth for his mother. Okay, so this is what the Lord wants to manifest in here. Okay?
Das ist, was der Herr hierin manifestieren möchte.
The two different characters.
Diese zwei verschiedene Charaktere.
The ones that hate you, they want to destroy you.
So, die dich hassen, die wollen dich zerstören.
Yeah, but you should love them and try to save them.
Aber
Okay.
du sollst sie lieben und versuchen, sie zu gewinnen.
Okay, and that's the manifestation the Lord wants to achieve in this time.
Und das
Okay?
ist die Manifestation, die der Herr in dieser Zeit erreichen möchte.
And it's obviously only possible if we cling close to Christ. Okay?
Das ist natürlich nur möglich, wenn wir sehr nah an Christus hängen.
Yeah, because whenever we get falsely accused or slandered or whatever, we want to pay back, right? We have also murder and hatred in our own hearts.
Wenn wir immer falsch angeklagt werden oder schlecht übergeredet werden, wir wollen zurückzahlen, denn auch wir haben Mord und Gewalt in unserem Herzen.
And therefore this is something where we need God's help.
Und deswegen da ist gerade ein Bereich, wo wir Gottes Hilfe benötigen.
Therefore it's important to know His will and to already equip us with His promises.
Und deswegen ist es wichtig, seine Wille zu verstehen und dann, dass wir uns rüsten mit seinem Verheißungen,
that in this time we can represent him correctly.
sodass in dieser Zeit hier wir können ihn auf korrekte Weise darstellen.
And we also need to understand, okay, that he will give us added grace in this testing trial.
Wir müssen aber auch verstehen, dass er uns zusätzliche Gnade geben wird in diese Zeit der Versuchung.
But still, we need to prepare now in order that he can give it to us, that we can receive it.
Wir müssen uns vorbereiten, sodass wir das denn erhalten können. Amen.
Okay, so it's important that we know what we can expect and that when it comes, we know what we need to do.
Es ist wichtig, dass wir wissen, was wir zu erwarten haben und dann, wenn es eintrifft, auch was wir denn tun sollen.
And I can already tell you of those things that we can already hear from this side and this side, it gets more and more intense. Okay?
Ich kann bereits sagen, das, was wir hören auf diese und jene Seite, intensivisiert sich.
And it's not nice.
Es ist eben nicht besonders schön.
Okay, then let's close with our prayer round.
Lasst uns Schluss machen mit unserer Gebet.